Hey guys, FilthyRobot here, showing you how to beat Orc Young and Orc Berserkers. This is really an early game fight. Later on in the game, you will occasionally encounter very small Orc camps, and you will just steamroll them because they're very small Orc camps in the late game. But in the early game, Orc Berserkers and Orc Young actually represent a fairly formidable force. They have very high damage relative to the number of unit models on the board, which means that if you don't have really good armor or don't have really high melee defense brothers, or even if you do and you get a little bit unlucky, you can take some really nasty losses. So let's talk a little bit about the way I like to take these fights early. Orc Berserkers are fairly fast. They are 9 AP units, like most units in the game, but they also have Pathfinder, so elevation changes always favor the Berserkers. Berserkers are programmed in such a way that they try to flank. They rarely just slam into your front lines like Orc Warriors or Orc Young will do, and then they're more interested in moving around to the side, taking an extra turn or two to engage, but finding an isolated brother or a brother that they consider a weaker brother to attack, like an archer or something like that. Your goal is to take advantage of the fact that A, they don't like to charge into you directly, they don't like to charge into things like Spear Wall, and B, that their mobility is very, very predictable. A two-handed Orc Berserker needs to be one tile away from one of your brothers to engage them. A one-handed Orc Berserker needs to be 3 tiles away from one of your brothers at the beginning of a turn to engage them. Your goal is never to be standing next to a one-handed Orc Berserker who gets to attack twice, and never be standing next to a two-handed Orc Berserker who gets to attack at all. And you can mostly do this by positioning. It's not always going to be perfect. There's going to be some rounds where you're of course going to have to take those hits, but the goal is basically to continually move in such a way that prevent them from getting good attacks. Their burst damage is very high. When you have low HP brothers and low armor brothers, like in this fight here, you really don't want a brother in 115 male getting hit twice by an Orc Berserker with a cleaver. It would just do insane amounts of damage. Another thing to remember is Berserkers get stronger every time they hit you, or if they kill, or if you lose a brother, they get really much stronger. They get a stacking buff that will stay for the duration of that. I have definitely wiped campaigns to one Berserker just refusing to die and then just scything through my entire group. So this is something you should be concerned of. It's not a nothing fight to be dealing with them. But the way that you can move your guys around often lets you take this. This is not this is unlike, for example, Ancient Undead, where your goal is to get locked in and get brawling as soon as possible. This is much more of a repositioning fight. You can actually take these fights fairly early if you have a couple archers and a couple of spear brothers. Even when you're not like full 12 people and when your guys aren't very good, you can often take these fights as well, just because of the mobility element of this. Just make sure you keep abusing the radius of which these Berserkers can attack. I tend to focus the more mobile ones, the one-handed ones, ahead of the two-handed ones. The two-handed ones can be kited almost indefinitely. You can just keep moving back, keep moving back, keep moving back. The one-handed ones have a much bigger aggro range. Weapons that do well versus Berserkers. Accuracy is key. You like high damage weapons, of course, because you do want to burst them down when they do finally get in a position where you can't move away from them or you can't kite them anymore. You do want to burst them in one turn. And because of the way they engage kind of piecemeal. Oftentimes you can burst them down one at a time while the other ones are not in a position to do damage. They don't wear a lot of armor, and they don't have a ton of HP. So it is possible to hit them with weapons that do good damage to flesh, like swords, cleavers, etc. When they're mixed with Orc Young, it's a little bit more annoying, but not too much more annoying. Orc Young, the biggest threat Orc Young have, they do a fair amount of damage, especially early game if you don't have a lot of armor, but the biggest threat Orc Young have is they stun. Berserkers can do it as well. It's a stun charge. I'm not sure the exact tile radius. I think it's a 4-tile radius that they can attack from, so I think it's like a Geist Shout, basically. It's 3 tiles in front of them they can charge into. And it costs a chunk of AP, but it will stun your brother for the round. Later on, once you get Indomitable, this is something you can plan for and make them waste their stuns and have basically no impact. But in the early game, this is something that represents a potential death to one of your brothers. If you get stuns there and then attacked by a Berserker a little bit later, you're in a lot of trouble. Elevation changes, of course, favor the Orcs. They're much more mobile than you, both between Pathfinder and stuns, and when you start fighting Orc Warriors, the knockback. So you should be a little bit careful of how you position relative to ledges. But in general, kite backwards, kill them one at a time. Try not to be in range of their two-handed attacks. Do anything you can to prevent that. They're not stunnable, but if you give them wounds that reduce initiative, you can go ahead of them. If you have adrenaline, you can go ahead of them. Sometimes in the early game, your brothers will have light enough armor that you can go ahead of them. The goal is to kill them before they get their attacks off. Like all Orcs, their morale is kind of poor. So if you have the opportunity to break them, that will of course be very good. Just make sure you don't let them get away from you once they're broken, because they will recover their morale and come back, especially in the early game. And Orc Young and Orc Berserkers with that stun charge are super annoying if they break free and then come back a little bit later. Another thing you can do, especially in the early game when you have lots of bad brothers, is it's okay to use a sacrificial brother in this fight. They will chase a brother quite far if you want to isolate a brother and move him away, deliberately sacrificing to give yourself the time to buy damage on the rest of the team. That works very, very well. And in the early game, when you're happily getting rid of some of the very crummy recruits you picked up, that might be something you're considering doing. Later, of course, you don't want to lose brothers because you have very good brothers. That strategy, of course, isn't going to be as useful. But later in the game, these are not a particularly difficult fight to have. All right, hopefully this helped. I'll, of course, leave you guys the full fight to watch. And thanks for watching. See you soon. Orc Young, some Berserkers. It's totally doable. He's only going to be at Wavering. But he needs to be in the fight. Always leveled. Missed our archery roll. Stam and HP rolled pretty well. This is nimble. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, when he loses the drunkard trait, you immediately buy him a drink. It helps fix that. Sold all my swords, apparently. Yeah, we went pretty deep into our money reserves to get to where pick up the guys we picked up here. This is our other drunkard here. This guy actually is we're gonna notice if we lose drunkard here, we're gonna lose the resolve is gonna be noticeable. Fighting orcs. Don't mind. These are berserkers though. We really just want damage. Flails are really unexciting versus berserkers. Alright. Here we go. 5 resolve for 5 aims. Also 10% damage. That's not nothing. Two-handed ones. There's a young orc too. It's actually a fair amount of damage. There's the Orc Young. Archers being archers. I think I want to engage on this rank here. Again, they can move in and attack once if we stay there. Maybe it's one rank back. It's definitely one rank back. It's this rank we want to engage on. Archer's going to be in the way again. So tempting. 2 high ground attacks there. If we move in, the Orc gets to, the Berserker gets to hit us. I can just let it come up. Oh, went for it. Okay. This double hills over there is pretty rough for us. Javelin. Might be able to handle that. He only gets 1 attack either way if I go there. He might just come down to here though. Can't move. We move to there. He gets in, hits us once. Does a lot of damage. It's probably still okay. Oh, that would have been very nice, you know, to have killed him instead of not. Oh, he had an action left. Did not mean to walk in and get headshot. This guy's gonna get fucking cracked too. So if that 210 mil is enough. Missed there. You can die here. There's 2 places we can die. Charge instead of moved in and attack. That's great. There. What the fuck was that? Why didn't he go? Axe in 3 turns. Took 2 shots to the off chance we kill that guy. Archers, come on. Everybody just missed. Took 5 shots at him. Okay, didn't die for it. It's nice. More misses. Thought I had footwork there, but I don't. 2 skull hits there. Miss. Can rotate him out. I don't really want to be a by Berserker, but it's a nimble bannerman right there. Probably lives. I'd really like to not put this guy in harm's way again. Especially with that bleed. Nice. Okay. Needs to be rotated. The question is with who? Can't take any more hits there. Code Monkey is okay. I think he is, if I remember correctly, he is a pretty decent tank. Farmhand too, which is nice. We just cured Drunkard off him. It would be nice to keep him. And who is this with the sword? Rusted Shovel. Yeah, about that. Nice. Got some hits in. Actually did something. Panicked him. Still bleeding. Nice. Forgot I was gonna rotate him in. Doesn't matter at all, but okay, got there. One tool. Got a man splitter.